I think we're live-ish. Let's wait like 30 seconds just to see if anyone pops in, and then we can get started. How is everyone doing today?
Doing pretty good. Getting, how are you doing?
I am doing good. I woke up like 2 hours ago and it's 12 p.m. So yeah.
I wouldn't say that's too bad of a wake up time. Like at least it wasn't like 1 p.m. Right?
Hey, I woke up because I had to do AP Calc practice.
Oh yeah. Do you have your test on Monday?
Monday, yeah.
Which test do you have on Monday?
AP Calc.
Ooh, okay. You're looking forward to
reaction.
I mean, if you're gonna be like French or Spanish, that's like something that's not gonna affect your career too much. It'd be like, okay, cool, but
AP Calc.
how are you guys?
Don't worry, getting will be fine.
Yeah.
I hope
Have
so.
you done any APs yet, Ganning?
I took 3 last year and I have 3 this year. So
nice. What about Emily? How are your exams going?
I had 4 last week, so I'm kind of like dead. And then I have 2 this week, and that's it. So
okay.
No more APs for me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
nice.
Wow, that is so like this is like the worst time to be hosting an event. So thank you so much for joining us. Right smack in the middle of your exams. But yeah, before we start, I just wanted to ask, what's your experience been like as Queen, Emily?
Oh, well, I've only had the title for like, I don't know how many hours, like less than 12 hours. So it's very weird and crazy, I guess.
Actually, did you have to, like, for context, Emily was crowned prom queen last night. So I'm like very new to this idea, this concept, and I'm so curious about, did you have to like give a speech or something?
No. So I don't know if y'all have watched Mean Girls, but I did not give a speech like she did. But it was just like we lined up and then the DJ like announced who won. So no speech, nothing like that.
Wow, that's so cool though. Okay, awesome. I'll stop annoying you about it now. Let's go ahead and get started. So this is Serverless Camp, the student experience. This is a chance for us to kind of put forth our student experience because Emily and Ganning used to be, originally they were students in their first cohorts, and then they grew to be literally the owners of the curriculum and the counselor bot that the entire serverless camp is run on. So I'm really curious to know about what that process was like, what your experience was like as a student, and how you grew into your roles in which you're in today, the projects that you built, all that kind of stuff. Before we get started with the meat of this conversation, do you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Yeah.
Emily can go first.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm a high school junior in North Carolina. I originally I was a student in the summer 2021, I believe. It was last summer's cohort of Serverless Camp, and I thought it was a really fun experience. We did Microsoft Azure, and my final project was Counselor Bot, which Emily actually started, and I just added some stuff onto. Yeah.
Well, I would say adding on to that, I think Ganning didn't really just add on stuff to it. He completely like added new features and fixed a lot of bugs. So yeah, don't downplay your contributions. But yeah, my name is Emily. I'm a high school senior in North Carolina. I was a student in the fall 2020 Serverless Camp iteration, and I built the project called Bunny Image, which I'm going to talk about today. I was also an instructor for the spring 2021 and summer 2021 iterations. So I got to meet a lot of cool people there and see what projects they were able to build. For the summer 2021 iteration, I did develop the counselor bot that was used for that one. And then, like Ganning said, he revamped it, added new features, and that's what we're going to be using for this new summer 2022 iteration.
Yes, I'm really excited about it. Also, we have a few people in the chat here. So hello, Brian. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Just throw them in the chat, and we'll have like a Q&A section at the end, and we'll just address everything over there. Before we talk about projects, could you tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a student? You can just whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, I guess I can go first. Because my experience was more recent. So last year, like just beyond, like obviously we had the instructor, like last year was like live streams and stuff, but we changed that up a bit. So last year it was like 1 week of like a 2 hour session or something of like going through 1 week every weekend or something like that, and then it would go through our assignments for the next week. But beyond that, there was also like with the council, but there was each week had like 7 or 8 assignments, if you want to put it that way. They're individual GitHub issues, and those are what guide you through the curriculum. And what I found really like what I really liked about the curriculum was that it's not just like theoretical stuff, but it's more like stuff that you can actually use, right? Like later, Emily will talk about bunny image, and that was her final project. But we also got to create that in the serverless curriculum, and it was just a really fun experience, right? I think one of the things we created was something where you could text a picture to like a phone number, and you could get back a song based on your emotion, and I thought that was pretty cool. But also, we also had last year, there was also like social events in addition to like learning things. And like these social events, it would be like we could meet other students part of the camp. I think one of them was like a resume workshop, and then another one was we got to meet someone from a Target, like a senior project manager from Target, something like that. It was pretty cool. Yeah, I really thought it was an enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And it's totally fine. Adding on to that, I was in the previous one, so we kind of did change iteration. But for me, what I enjoyed the most from my experience as a serverless student was kind of like what Ganning mentioned already, but being able to learn things that I can actually use. So for example, when I came into the camp, I had like no idea what GitHub was. I didn't know how to use it. I didn't know the use cases for it. And through the camp, I was able to learn how to use this great platform and something that you obviously need if you want to advance your career in software development. And through that, I've been using GitHub on all of my projects from now on. And I just think we are able to learn a lot of real world skills you might not really get in school. Like at school, they might teach you algorithms, they might teach you structures, things like that. But you have to learn how to apply those things into the projects you're building. And I think Serverless Camp really reinforces that idea that you should be able to build projects, and we reinforce the idea that you can learn on your own, we help you learn, and in the end you come out with a great project that you can use in your daily life even, or just for putting on your resume or for learning new things.
Yeah. I want to add real quick, like the reason we're having this big conversation about just the student experience by itself is because the camp itself is run in a way where your student experience is prioritized over anything else, right? That's what happened last year where we realized like, hey, live streams weren't working. We could have just been like, okay, we'll fix it next year. But no, we decided to just like Emily just got on the spot, started recording videos, and we fixed that right on the spot, right? So as you're going through this curriculum this summer and as you're going through the mentorship program on a day-to-day basis, if you ever run into things that you notice aren't really fitting in with your own learning style, forget the fact that there's other students there. We want to make sure that you individually have a good time and that you're learning in the best way possible. We're going to have a lot of checkpoints and a lot of forums and a lot of opportunities to meet with our team to give us your feedback. Most of it will be communicated through Discord. So just let us know anything that you don't like, right? Most likely it's an issue that other students are also facing and feeling. And we will try to fix that as soon as possible. And even if it is something that is individually like unique to you, you're like, hey, this is great, but if you added this new feature, it would really help me learn better or faster or more efficiently. We will do what we can to provide that to you, because that's literally our goal, right? Is to make sure every individual student has a good time. Like the group is great, but if you're having a bad time as one student, then that's not good for us. Again, and you mentioned a little bit about the mentorship program. Do you want to go into a little bit more detail about that?
Yeah, so with the mentorship program, when I was a student, I got paired up with Anthony. He's a senior project manager at Microsoft. So it's pretty cool to get to talk to him about like everything really. I talked to him about, so basically we had weekly meetings, I believe, and it was some weeks we had these pair coding assignments where we would sit down and code an Azure API endpoint together. right? And some of those, I think one of them that we coded was like a endpoint that translated from plain English to Morse code. So they're just fun little quirky projects that we can sit down and do together. And through those little like coding sessions, I get to see like how he like not only code, like how like real professionals think, I guess, when trying to solve these types of problems, or like complete these types of tasks, I guess. And also, in addition to like coding stuff with him, I also asked him a lot of questions about like software development or like programming as a career in the real world. So something like what can I do now to like be prepared later and stuff like that. I thought it was a really great experience for all.
Yeah. Emily, what about you?
Yeah, I think building on to what Ganning said again about the mentorship program, I think a big thing about this portion of the camp is it's really creating the bridge between your learning at school and real world applications of the skills that you learn there. For example, my mentor, we talked a lot about industry standard things like how would I code this to be more efficient, to be more understandable, in the case that I'm working with, other coworkers developing this tool in the real world. And I think they just don't really teach that in school. And it's really helpful to just have someone with that experience, that level of experience that you're able to freely reach out to and talk to. Doesn't even have to be specifically about technical skills. It can be about soft skills, things like communication and what the software development industry is like. And they're helpful in terms of career advice and to all the way to like solving, helping you solve a bug. So, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, they're really good connections to have. And in general, this year, obviously, not everyone's going to have a one on one mentor, but I do encourage the students who are part of the GSC to connect with all of the mentors who are going to be mentoring the GSC. So that's going to look more of like people that are hosting workshops, people that are active in our Discord. If you see that they're a mentor, connect with them, get to know them, reach out to them. If you see that, hey, this person likes golf, I like golf, reach out to that person, talk to them about it. We will host workshops on how you can build a better mentorship relationship with someone, even if we're not giving you that one-on-one connection directly. So yeah, make the most that you can, because like Emily and Ganning mentioned, they can be really valuable both to your academic career, but also your job career afterwards as well. Okay, that's enough questions from me. I'm going to go ahead and move on to talking a little bit about your projects. Before we get into each individual one, Emily and Ganning, what was your like specific project building experience like? How did you go about coming up with these ideas and kind of following through with them?
Yeah, so coming up with the idea for my project, it was pretty interesting. So basically, in my cohort, we used CounselorBot as well. And one of the things that I noticed with CounselorBot was that it was great. Don't get me wrong with that, but there was still some like quirks, I guess, that could be fixed. I'll give a specific example. Like pull requests could be merged even if like the code that the student wrote wasn't correct, and that would kind of defeat the purpose of having the bot check your code, because we don't want the student merging their code to the main branch if the code is wrong. Right. And with this, with my final project, it was something that I met with my mentor, Anthony, about, and then we would talk about things, how to solve stuff. I think one of the problems we ran into was like Azure Functions cold starting. So that was something we had to solve. But yeah, so it was pretty cool how we ended up building like something that we're going to be using for this iteration of the camp.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation of like how what one way you could go about brainstorming ideas, like getting recognized a problem and he chose to find that problem to solve it. And then I think that's also the process I went through. So I'm going to talk about the specific problem later, but it was related to online school and I saw a lot of my friends struggling with it too. So I thought that building an application could potentially solve this issue. In terms of actually going about planning how to do your project, I would say that Bit Project, we do provide a lot of guidance on that. Even in the step of brainstorming, we have like try thinking of an API you would want to use. What's an issue you see in your daily life? We provide guidance on that. So if you just come in with a camp with nothing, blank mind, no idea of what you want to do, that's totally fine, because we do guide you through that. And then even in planning the project, we guide you through making a flow chart, planning out all the different sections, sectioning it all out, and piecing it all together to make your final project. So if it does seem intimidating at first, that's totally fine. I think a great part of this curriculum is that we do help you with that.
Yep, I couldn't have said it better myself. So from there, let's just go ahead and talk about Bunny Image.
Awesome. Okay, so my project in the serverless camp iteration from 2020 is Bunny Image. And a quick explanation of what the inspiration for this app actually came from. So in 2020, I was in online school. My entire state was, I think most of the country was as well. We had online school, so therefore we had online tests. And for tests online, when we had to show our work, we had to write out answers on paper. We had to upload all this handwritten work. Now I had to find out an idea, a way for me to transfer pictures from my phone all the way to my laptop, because the test was open on my laptop. Some of my friends, they had AirDrop, so they just AirDrop their pictures to the laptop. But I had a Windows laptop and then an Apple iPhone. So that just nothing worked. And with that time constraint, I had to figure out creative ways like sending the images through email, etc., in order to get my work submitted for the test. And obviously that's going to lead to a lot of stress, maybe lower grades if you don't have enough time to complete the test, and things like that. I was like, some of my friends were complaining about it too, and I just thought, maybe I can solve this with serverless functions. So what my project Bunny Image actually does is it takes your image. So everything is done completely on a website. So it doesn't matter what operating system you have. It doesn't matter if you have a Windows laptop, if you have a Mac, if you have a Android phone, doesn't matter. As long as you have a web browser, you're good. So you take a picture on your phone, you upload it to the website. Bunny Image converts it to a PDF, and then on your laptop, you can download it. And all of this is done through a secret code that you create to name your image or PDF as it's going to be. So this is just a quick peek into the UI. So as you can see here, the mouse just clicked on the upload image. This is where on your phone you would upload a file. And just like that, you would add a secret code to whatever your image's name is. I do recognize this could be a security issue, but this was just a basic draft of the project. And then once you're done, you could click on download, and then you would be able to download your image using the secret code you provided. So that's one of a short, simple solution using serverless functions to the problem of online school, which I described in the 2 slides ago. All right, I think we're going to go transition over to Ganning. He's going to talk about the counselor bot, which once again, I coded, and then he discovered some bugs and added some awesome new features. So Ganning, go ahead.
Yes. So like Emily just said, she originally developed counselor bot in, I don't remember when, but it was before my iteration of the camp. So we actually ended up using it. And my final project was just building on it, right? Counselor bot, if you aren't familiar with it, it's a GitHub bot. So there's not really a UI like Emily's website. It's more of like functionality and what it does when you're going through the curriculum. Yeah, so the problem that I identified, I'll go into it in a second. But so for my iteration of the serverless camp, everything was on GitHub, right? Like it is this year. And all basically GitHub is if you don't know, it's like Google Drive, but for code. So on GitHub, CounselorBot would create issues or what is called assignments, right? That the student needs to complete. And it helps guide the student through the serverless course. The bot would test students' code and make sure that it's actually doing what the student says it does. And therefore, when the code breaks, the student would need to go and debug, helping them learn whatever code they wrote is incorrect and how do they fix it, right? That sounds like a great idea, and it was, except there was a few quirks with it that we wanted to fix. Some of these issues included accidentally merging a branch when it's not ready, right? I touched on this briefly before. Maybe the code the student wrote was wrong, and they're still able to merge it. Sometimes the bot just wouldn't open a new issue, and there was sometimes merge conflicts that students would need to resolve, but they should never have to deal with that. So on this image, or on the scrolling GIF, however you call that, on the screen right there, you'll see that that's an example of an assignment. It's, as you see, it's like endless scrolling. It's like every time you keep scrolling, there's always more, right? So that was what I was trying to solve with my project. Instead of having everything, all assignments on one long issue thread, we would split it into maybe 3 or 4 separate issues. So after every time you complete an assignment, you would, and granted that you did it correctly, we would have it merge onto the main branch, and then a new issue would open, instead of having every issue just opening as issue comments within one issue thread. Another issue with this, if you'll look on the image on the right, top right side, it's very difficult to find where your code went wrong. You would have to go click on 5 or 6 tabs. So you have to go into checks, and then you have to go into the bunny image build or run, and then you have to click on the thing that it's red, right? That might sound easy if you've done it, like, let's say 15 or 20 times, but let's say you're a new student to GitHub, right? You just started using this curriculum. It might be very difficult to find where that was at first. And I tried to solve that with CounselorBot Saves the Day, which is what I ended up calling my project. But yeah, that was just the problem I identified. It was more of like a user experience thing. So like, how could we improve the student experience of the serverless camp? And yeah, so that left what I was just talking about with the long issue threads and stuff. It left me and many other students in the summer 2021 cohort looking like this, trying to debug errors with our code. And that's where CounselorBot upgraded, or CounselorBot Saves the Day comes from, right? That's where the idea of my project. So with CounselorBot Saves the Day, instead of being deployed on Heroku, CounselorBot is now serverless. So before, what we were using to run the serverless camp wasn't actually a serverless function, but now it is a serverless function. So it makes sense. And what this means is it's more scalable, more efficient when there are more users, right? So let's say we had 500 people start the camp. Serverless functions is able to scale to that. It's also more reliable, right? So I took away this, it was a file called something like .progress, something like that. We took that file away. We're storing everything on the cloud now, so we don't need it to store it locally, and there's no more merge conflicts, which is super nice. And CounselorBot is pretty smart, like that brain suggests on the right. So there's separate pull requests, separate issues for each step. So there's no more long issue comments. So issues now reopen when accidentally closed by the user now, right? So if the user accidentally closed the issue for any reason before, CounselorBot would be messed up. But now the issue would reopen, and then the user would be able to run their check again. Now, I mentioned before, but CounselorBot is deployed on serverless functions. There's also what's known as main branch protection. So let's say the user's code was not correctly, they didn't write it correctly, right? So this would prevent the user from merging their code to the main branch if their code is wrong. It's just a giant red button. It's not going to let you merge. After that, there's also, we removed dependency issues with troublesome files, so there's no more merge conflicts. There's also a step skipper feature. So especially for us on the Bit project side, to test each step, having a step skipper is really helpful, and not needing to go through like 7 or 8 steps just to test step 9 individually, for example. And then there's also an intelligent question and answer thing, where it's like if you post a comment on the issue thread, it would allow you to, the CounselorBot would respond with the answer to that. And that is based on questions that we received last year, and we had it all on Piazza, but then we exported it, put it onto Azure. Now we have this. We could go to the next slide. Yeah, so for sake of time, I'm not going to go through a live demo of CounselorBot, but if you do want to go, if you want to test everything out, we have our GitHub JavaScript curriculum, which is at github.com/ bit.ly/serverless camp application. And all this is designed to do is give you an introduction to JavaScript, directions to use the repo, and how to install CounselorBot is all on the repo itself. And yeah, if you want to try it out, go ahead and use that repo, and then learn some JavaScript while you're at it. Yeah.
Awesome. That was really amazing. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat while we're just here talking for the next few minutes. I have a few questions. One of them is, like, how do you feel about the fact that your work from your final projects has been integrated into the camp? I don't think I've ever asked you this before, for both of you.
You haven't asked me that before. But wait, I genuinely think it's really cool. Like, it's something that I created, and it's actually something that has like a real impact on people. And I find that things like that to be really cool about programming, right? Because when you're coding, all you're doing is like writing lines of text on a screen. That sounds pretty boring, right? But being able to actually see like the impact of your work, like, and other people using it's one of the most rewarding things, I would say, at least for me when I'm programming things. Like with CounselorBot, that's what people are using. That's what students are using for the serverless application repo, and it's what they're going to be using for the summer camp, for the summer cohort, this iteration. And I think it's super rewarding. Yeah.
So I guess for me, a lot of people ask like, "Oh, what are you gonna major in?" And then I say like, "Oh, probably computer science," and they're like, "Oh, that sounds boring." And I think a lot of that comes from the idea that a lot of people just think that coding, like Ganning said, is just typing on a computer. But I like to define it as creating things. And when you see that you create things that other people can use, and when you create things that you can use yourself, like I used Bunny Image. Um, it's like a great way for yourself to be able to solve problems that other things wouldn't be able to do. I guess a good example of this is like CounselorBot. Like we're trying to use GitHub Learning Lab, and we didn't think it had all the features that we really wanted for it to have. And this is kind of how technology advances forward. You find problems and then you solve them using new innovations. And I think when you complete your projects in Serverless Camp, you're doing the exact same thing. And even if your project could be like silly, or you might think it's not a practical application of something, it's still a new idea and it's being implemented. And you're using code to do something. So I think, did I go too far away from the original question? But I guess going back to Shrey's original question about what I feel about my work being in the serverless camp, I honestly would say that I have the same answer as Ganning. It's just awesome to be able to see people using the thing you coded and actually learning from it. So, yeah.
Awesome. I'm actually seeing some questions in the Slido, which I didn't realize were there. So before I get to those really quickly, those responses were very eloquent, very well said. I want to add that, like, when Ganning and Emily were building these projects, it wasn't like an opportunistic thing. It wasn't like, oh my God, I have to build the coolest thing in the world, and then it will get like put onto this big platform that hundreds of people are going to see. In Emily's case, she had no idea this was even going to pop up. It wasn't part of our curriculum last year either, right? Like, it could have been, but it wasn't. So that was something that we added much later. And in Ganning's case, he went into it like knowing it was going to benefit the program at a time when we only had 20 students. So, right, he wasn't thinking, oh, hundreds of people are going to see this, is going to be great for my resume. It was simply, this is a cool thing and I want to help it. So when you're going into your projects, I think that's something that I want to see students prioritize. Not that it's going to affect how we look at your projects, but think about like real world issues, but they can also be issues that could be like, hey, this is a skill that I want to learn, that I want to demonstrate to people that I know. Or it can be, this is a problem that only affects my life. That's fine. It's still a real world issue, right? You don't have to worry too much about what type of project you're building. So Anita asked, how is your experience with the mentorship program? So I think we touched on this a little bit. Would you want to kind of go back and talk about that again?
Yeah, I guess I can go first, like I have been with all these questions. But I think with the mentorship program, like I mentioned a bit before on like how we got to code together, and I asked him about real questions. But also like more than that, I feel like I developed like friendship with my mentor. It's like he'll always be someone that like I can talk to in the future if I have a question about like maybe Azure Functions or just programming in general. Or but more than that, like it's I think it's really rewarding, like these connections that you can make right now. Like if you know people, like I know they say like it's not often like how much you know, but who you know if you want to get a internship or a job if you're a student right now in the future, right? Just having these connections is really helpful for your future, and so you get in the mentorship program. So
Going back to kind of what I said before, I kind of touched on and said that the mentorship program is good for applying your technical skills from your education to real world skills where you're building actual projects. I think in terms of that, the mentorship program is very helpful. Networking, like Ganning said, I can probably go ask my mentor if he knows any opportunities around him, because in the workforce they're continuously recruiting people. There's so many opportunities out there, and it's just like, do you know the people who know of these opportunities? And through there, are you able to get them? And I guess another thing I would want to say about the mentorship program is I think it just adds to the sense of community. You have the students, right? You have the students, and then you have the mentors. And then mentors, they act as your mentor. They give you advice. They give you a different perspective that your peers might not be able to give you, just like your teachers in school and professors. So and it basically just adds another dimension to this program, and I think that's what makes it so cool.
Yeah. I think a lot of students often like suffer from this, like, how do I, like, what does a mentorship mean, right? Like, we don't know that at a stage when you're in like high school and college. What does it even mean to have someone who's there to support your career if you haven't started a career and you don't know what that's going to be? And I want to say, like, if you're part of the mentorship program, it's slightly easier because you have someone who is like one-on-one dedicated to your career, and they can help answer that question of how they can support you as well. But let's say you talk to them consistently over the course of the 8 weeks, or even if you're in the GSC and you maintain like a good relationship with someone who did a workshop over the course of those 8 to 10 weeks, right? And then you never talk to them again for like 2 years. And then 2 years later, you're like, oh, wow, I'm applying to jobs and I can't find anything. And I really want someone who can look over my resume or someone who can help me prepare for a technical interview. That person is going to remember that you were active during this camp and that you were constantly, having fun conversations with them, getting to know them better, like make it a two-way discussion. And they're going to want to help even if you haven't had any communication in the last 2 years. So it's not as much about making like a best friend for life, but even if you give them a good like experience and they provide you with good resources during the course of this camp, they can be a connection for life after that. So we'll touch on more ways in which you can stay connected with mentors and things over the summer. We had a really good question about what advice you can give to beginners who just started learning serverless.
Okay. Wait. So, what advice I'd give to beginners learning serverless, right? Okay. I think there's a lot of different ways that like most students can learn. Some people like to first get a brief overview of stuff before diving into the details, while others just directly read, like start coding, and then that's how they learn. So there's definitely different ways, but I'll give the way that I think was the way that I learned, and what worked for me was like as much as people don't like it, I would read at least like the homepage of their documentation of like Azure Functions or something like that. So like it's not just so much like in VS Code where you're clicking a button say create Azure Functions. Like what are you actually creating, right? So you have a general idea of like what you're actually doing. So this way, when you're looking at specific details, you know what like in the bigger picture, you know what you're doing, and that might prove helpful later on when you're maybe debugging issues, right? like I can go back to cold start, that problem, right? So the way that Azure functions work is like every time if you haven't called it in a while, whatever the instance that it's running on it's going to go to sleep, right? So next time when you call it, it needs to wake up again, and that's why it takes, let's say, 15 seconds or so whenever you call the function a while before it can respond. And then we had to figure out a way to solve that, right? So, and the only reason I would have known that is either by talking to my mentor or actually just reading what Azure Functions is and how it runs on. But also, beyond just coding like assignments, I would say like beyond the assignments in Serverless Camp, I would say go out there and create things that really interest you, right? Because with what the credits that you get in Serverless Camp, you're gonna have enough left over so that you can create your own projects. I think what I created, like outside of Serverless Camp, I created something. It was like you could take a picture with your webcam on your camera, and it would create a playlist for you, right? So it was expanding on that idea of like you could text an image of yourself and get a song back. You'd be able to have a whole playlist created to your Spotify account based on one picture, and that really helped me learn like how we can use like multiple Azure functions working together to create something that we need. Yes.
I thought that was really great advice. One thing I would add to that is you should come into learning serverless knowing that a lot of concepts are going to be very abstract. For example, I don't want to confuse you now, but serverless, the name serverless is kind of misleading because it's technically not like serverless. So you aren't managing a server, but the company out there is managing a server somewhere around the universe. So yeah, but a lot of things like that in serverless might be confusing at first. Like Ganning said, be sure to read documentation. If you don't understand something, try to understand it. And if you don't understand it at first, that's totally fine. I think a lot of it comes through just using the technology over and over again. And then it's kind of like learning GitHub. Like for when you first start with GitHub, you have like no idea why commits are even like used. You have no idea why pull requests are even important. But as you use it more and more, you understand the process, the workflow of everything better and better. Same thing with serverless. As you code more and more Azure functions and you see how they can work together, how you can connect them in different ways to communicate information, you'll begin to understand why and how they work and what they can be used for. And for concepts like cold start, you really learn through experience. Like I didn't really understand what cold start was until I noticed that after I stopped calling my Azure function for a while, it would get really slow. And I wondered why it got really slow. And through this experience, I was able to understand what cold start was. It's kind of like a reverse engineering thing, but you still learn the concept. So yeah, I guess that's what my advice would be.
Yeah. And in general, I think this kind of loops into both of your responses. It is vital to ask questions, not just for yourself, but also for the students around you and everyone else. If there's ever a time when you're learning a concept, and it doesn't just have to be in the serverless camp, it can be in life in general, ask a question, like say, hey, you totally just explained this. I still don't get it, right? Until the point where you can understand it and you can kind of regurgitate that and communicate that to someone else in a way that you sound really smart and you know about this topic, keep asking questions, ask smaller questions until you totally get that concept, right? Ganning wouldn't have known about the Azure cold start thing if he didn't ask that question first, right? He would have just been sitting there for 15 seconds every single time being like, this is a waste of my time, but it is what it is, So just ask a lot of questions in the Discord for our community. We're going to have like a community forum and everything, even if you're in like a college course, anywhere, just keep asking. How long does it take to finish the final project?
Yeah, so for final project, we have that allocated for weeks 5 to 8, I believe. So it's 5, 6, 7, 8. That's a 4-week span of time. I had to do the math because 8 minus 5 is like 3, but like it's actually 4. So, but yeah, it's a 4-week time to do your project. Generally, how this works is first week it's getting your idea solidified and creating like an overview of like your plan on how you're going to do this. right? So maybe you're creating flowcharts, you're drawing out diagrams, right? It doesn't have to be something super elaborate that's created on something like Lucidchart. You could just have it on a sheet of paper, use your pencil, and then draw like arrows from data is going to be sent from, let's say, your front end to this Azure function, which is going to store it into a database, right? So first week's usually just creating your plan. Second week and third week, third week, I would say is the meat of like what the most of things that you're going to get done. That's probably when you're going to be actually coding your project, right? And then finishing up, or not finishing up, but developing your backend and your front end if you have one. And then week 4 will generally be polishing up any bugs that you might have. And then I think this year we're also doing the Serverless Days Student Edition Conference again. So preparing your CFP for that conference and preparing your talks and writing about your project and getting how to present it.
Yep. And I think since Ganning mentioned the conference, one of the other important things about being like making projects is the ability to talk about them. So, I mean, you coded the project, you know the process. Now you have to work on communicating how you did it and what it could be used for. So, part of that 4 weeks of coding the project also includes writing your talk, potentially if you want to participate in the conference, and making a presentation that's clear but also interesting, but also detailed, that goes into your project, how you made it, how did you come up with the idea, maybe demonstrating the project, things like that. And yeah, so I would say 4 weeks for me was a pretty good time frame. I was also in school at that time. And I thought it was, I'd spend a couple hours in a week working on it. It really depends on the scale of your project, though. For example, if you have a really complicated project, obviously it's going to take longer than 4 weeks. We will help you try to pick a good idea that interests you, but also fits within that period of time, so you don't get rushed or anything.
I think the scale is like a really important point that you just mentioned. If you don't have time for the final project, you can choose to build something that's super simple and still a really good project, right? And in that case, like, do choose something simple that you know you can complete and you know you'll be proud of afterwards. You don't have to spend like 20 hours a week on a project for it to be good. But then I have known students who have spent like more than 15 hours a week as well, just depending on where you're at in life. If you're in school, if you're just chilling and it's vacation time, that's a decision for you to make. And the last question is, are there any technical or other challenges that you faced during the camp?
Technical challenges, other challenges. I think as Emily mentioned, like learning GitHub, it was my first time using GitHub as well for me. So it's definitely something new. At first, I tried using GitHub like a year before when I joined the camp, and I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty complicated. I was using GitHub Desktop at the time, so that was one of the challenges that I faced. But like during the camp, we switched through the live stream. Emily was actually doing the live stream, and she explained it really well. We ended up using command line GitHub, which I think is more widely used by, and you look smarter using command line. So that's a plus. But yeah, I think learning GitHub was definitely one of the biggest challenges for me. And the way I overcame that, I guess, is like creating analogies between stuff that you already know and like things that you're learning right now. So like maybe GitHub is like, I know this has been used a lot of times, but like GitHub is like Google Drive, but for code, right? Another challenge that I did have was, I would say, how do I put this? Like truly understanding like how Azure Functions worked, right? Because it is serverless, but yet there's still servers, right? But it's just not managed by you. So I think like understand like what every part of an Azure function does, right? Like if you know JavaScript, you know what console.log is. But like in Azure Functions, you don't use console.log, you use context.log. Why is that? Right? It's like the nitty-gritty stuff that I thought was pretty interesting to investigate. And yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And for me, I think the biggest technical obstacle was probably understanding serverless, because in the beginning I was on the Azure portal and coding directly in the Azure portal, which is horrible practice, right? And I really didn't understand that. So I guess it's not too much technical as it is like workflow and understanding how it's best to manage your code and how it's best to keep track of the different versions that you have. But I also overall, it was just a portal, and I thought that was the only place where you could code an Azure function. And I think I also had to get over the learning curve of understanding what the portal was and where the code was actually going, where it was running, and how it was getting called. Because for me personally, when I'm learning things, I'm very quick at picking up the basic skeleton of how to do it. Like I can go through the steps, but if I don't dig deeper, then I won't be able to understand why I do this step. And I think it's really important when you're learning things for anything, honestly, is to actually question what you're doing and then instead of just doing it because someone said it was correct. And not only does it help you understand it better, it also helps the information stick for a longer time.
That was very well said. Thank you so much, Emily and Ganning, for joining us today and talking to us about your experience. Any last thoughts, any last advice before the camp starts this summer?
I would say get excited because it's a really great experience. I'm genuinely saying that because I mean it. It was really fun for me. I learned a ton. Yeah, be excited for it. It'll be
Yeah,
fun.
for me, like this is a really good opportunity to learn how to make projects. Before this, I didn't really know how to manage code. I didn't really know how to organize a project. I didn't have the skills to make a back end and a front end and connect them together. And I think serverless is a great opportunity to learn one aspect of doing this and simultaneously also learn how to code a front end, which is something, a basic skill that is very helpful in the long term.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. If anyone has any other questions that we haven't addressed yet, feel free to ask them in the Discord, and we'll probably be back next week with another topic. So if there's anything that you're interested in learning about, like the mentorship program or anything else, please let us know, and we will do like a focus session on that specifically. Yeah. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.